This is the session number 6 for LISP. We are going to talk about support for VRFs within LISP. We are going to focus on the share mode. Let's review first how to configure ETRs for virtualization. Remember that we're talking about the share model that only virtualizes the EID space. We are not virtualizing the RLOC space. The particular command that does the trick is the EID table command that is going to relate a particular VRF with an instance number because LISP uses instance numbers in order to identify VRFs. So this is the particular command that does the trick. Let's illustrate this with an example. Let's say that we have this ETR that has only one wide area network connection to the core. It has this IP address that belongs to the global routing table. This router has a local area network connection that connects it to the EID. In this case, this interface will be related to the VRF users. So the configuration for this is standard. This is normal configuration that we already know how to define. We create first the VRF, and then we configure the local area network and relate this particular interface to the VRF, and then we configure the wide area network interface that lives in the global routing table. And then here comes the interesting part. We are going to use the command EID table in order to relate the user's VRF to the instance ID number. In this example, we are using 3000. You can use whatever number you want, but you need to be consistent. If you're going to use the VRF users, this particular VRF user with this route target across all your LISP domain, at each ETR, you need to perform this relation using the same instance ID number. And then we are going to do our usual database mapping. We are going to configure our endpoint ID, that in this case is actually the subnet that corresponds to the local area network, the RLOC, that is actually the IP address of our wide area network interface, and then the priority and the weight. Next, we are going to talk about how to configure proxy ITRs for virtualization. Remember that we're talking about the share model that only virtualizes the EID space, and it does not virtualizes the RLOC space. So remember that we usually configure proxy ITRs with a partial map cache in order to let the proxy ITR know what are the available endpoints IDs within a LISP domain. We usually use this command map cache in order to do so. So in this case, when doing virtualization, we are going to use the command EID table again. This is the command that does the trick. This command relates a particular VRF name with a particular instance ID number. Remember that LISP uses instance ID numbers to identify VRFs. And then within each of these mappings, we are going to enlist the EIDs that belong to each of these VRFs or instance IDs. Let's illustrate this with an example. Let's say that this LISP domain has this EID that belongs to VRF users, and we have this other EID that belongs to the VRF developers. So we will configure our proxy ITR first and defining the VRF. This is usual stuff. We know how to do that. And then when configuring LISP, we are going to use this command. This is the command that does the trick. We are going to map the VRF users to the instance ID number 3000. And within this mapping, we are going to use the usual command map cache to establish what is the EID that belongs to this VRF. We may have more than one EID. We usually will have more. This is just an example. And then we are going to use again the command EID table to map the VRF developers to the instance ID number 6000. And we are going to enlist here what are the available EIDs within this instance ID within the LISP network. In this case, we only have one, so we are going to use the usual map cache command in order to do so. Finally, we are going to configure the map server in order to support the share model. The configuration is mostly the same as the normal map server configuration. We are going to use sites in order to enlist what are the EID prefixes or EIDs that belong to each site. However, the only thing that changes is that we are going to add this parameter, instance ID, for each endpoint ID. That is the only difference or the only change that we are going to see when configuring map servers for the share model. This is the summary of what we saw in this session: how to configure ETRs, map servers, and proxy ITRs in order to support the share mode. These are the roles that require the actual changes in order to support virtualization. The other roles may require no particular LISP changes. Obviously, you will need to configure your VRFs and attach your EIDs to a particular VRF, but besides that, in order to make LISP work with the share mode, you only need to focus on ETRs, map servers, and proxy ITRs.